Good morning, Warriors. Back with another episode of Vigor Warriors 2. Let me see if I can adjust my thing here a little bit. All right. Welcome. This is mid-morning. I get a chance to kind of do one a little bit later. Had to run out and run an errand to the college, and I just coming back. So I figured I'd do one while sitting in the car. So this is February 23rd, 2/23/22. So we just passed the 2/22/22 mark, which is kind of cool. So hope everyone's doing well. Hope everybody's on the purpose. Once again, if you like what we're doing, please subscribe. I think we're over 350 now, so we're moving towards that 500 mark, which was the first goal. And then we're going to kind of keep going after that and see what we can do. And also thank you for the subscriptions and donations. I appreciate all the donations you guys send in. Like I said, I'm working little by little. Been crazy. I work about 65 hours a week, so I'm finally getting to the point where I may start kind of working on maybe trying to enhance what we're doing and get myself a regular webcam computer, which, you know, I'm kind of an old guy here, so I gotta get one of those that actually can work and I can kind of hook it up and figure it out. So we'll get there. But in the meantime, we'll do it by phone here and kind of do it as we go along. The main thing that I'm trying to do, of course, is to get the message out and get people to kind of see what we're talking about with this idea of retention, and we're talking about this journey. Some of you may know. I mean, if you have saw some of the earlier videos we did, I think we started in August. I spent 45 years fighting this back and forth, and I know recently we've had a couple of people talk about this too, that it's very difficult to go back and forth. And it's kind of in your mind, right? It's got to say, am I going to kind of leave this life forever? And I'm not going to say that it's impossible to have thoughts. You're going to have thoughts. I mean, I think as Kendler's book talked about, you need to, in order to do and work this and have transmuting, you're going to have some level of sexual energy. So, you have to have that. The question becomes, are you losing it? Are you kind of doing things that are getting to the point where it's depleting you and making you less of a warrior? Or is it something where it's benefiting you and helping you do things and achieve goals? The main thing we're looking to do is to make men and women and get people who are strong. And a lot of that strength comes from all those nutrients and things that you have that you're just letting go and depleting for no reason. Now, if you're doing it procreating, that's one thing. But beyond that, a lot of that becomes your own pleasure. Now, if you're in some kind of relationship, that's going to be your judgment to see where you're at with that. But once again, you don't want to lose your energy to the point where you're being depleted. And I know we talked about this the other day, but I think the one thing that's interesting, and I find myself even at 600 and about 140, almost 150 days, or maybe a little bit longer than that, on monk mode, and almost 630, and I can't remember what it is, but it's close to that. 630 on regular no-fab type of thing. And, one of the things that's interesting to me is when you go back and you look at this and why people go ahead and relapse. And one of the reasons is this whole thing of somehow missing out on excitement. And a lot of people feel like excitement is what drives people, right? And obviously, if you look at, situations that you have animals and people who are, not people so much, but animals that are castrated or they're fixed, they're not going to have that sort of drive and level. And so you have that inside of you. But I think people sometimes mistake the fact that, life should always be this nonstop type of thing. Now, we all kind of work in a way like that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all your emotions inside are always at that point where it always has to be some level of excitement. and having the adrenaline flowing in you so fast that you have to kind of do something about it. And so you have to go ahead and kind of use that. A lot of people that you find will live on the edge of, life so that they get the adrenaline. I mean, this explains why people do what they call bungee jumping off of hills, mountains, things like that, or doing these crazy types of activities. You look at some of these movies, you got these people who are doing all these crazy types of things in the movies, because it not only makes them money, of course, but it gives them a chance to kind of get that adrenaline flowing. And so they do that to get that excitement level up. The same thing we do for a lot of different things like that. So people sometimes need to increase their adrenaline. And so what ends up happening is that they kind of go for all these type of situations in which they're increasing their adrenaline. They're trying to get excited. And so the thing we're talking about, loss of energy here, is the same thing. A lot of people will do it because they need some excitement. And I know that I fell victim to that many times as well. And so one of the things you have to kind of remember is that even though you don't necessarily think that, living a peaceful, great life every day is exciting, just remember the opposite of that. If you go back and relapse, you may be getting a little pleasure for about 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden all the negative things kick in again, you've lost energy. So this is always something to remember as you're doing this. But this is kind of a key to me when we look at this kind of thing. You're really kind of focusing on the fact that, people need excitement. Now, why they need excitement? I mean, that may be part of human nature. I don't know that part of it necessarily, but people really strive to get excitement. They'll go to sporting events as a spectator to get that thrill of what's happening, the drama. You got people who are out there called drama kings and drama queens, right? All those type of people are looking to be on the edge of something, which is why we like cliffhangers a lot in watching shows on TV. Or we like movies that have cliffhangers and things like that, because people like that sort of thing. They like the idea that some things are going to not be noticeable, or things that you don't know what's going to end up happening. And this kind of stuff is what makes people excited. And again, this excitability is what creates a lot of people doing some crazy types of things. And so this is why we always look to see what motivates people. And what motivates a lot of people is this whole idea of they need to have excitement in their life. And so even though they do it consciously or subconsciously, they end up going ahead and creating unnecessary problems for themselves because they need to create drama, or they need to go and do something that is exciting. And having the peaceful feeling irritates people. And I think this is something that is really a very fascinating thing about human nature, which is why we get back into the whole thing about retention. And people struggle with this idea of keeping their energy inside, because obviously it doesn't provide the excitement that people want. And remember, we always live on this dynamic of good and evil. We live on this dynamic of exciting or unexciting, right? Or happy and unhappy type of thing. And if you're happy most of the time, that's blessing to you, and I think that comes from the retention. But because of that, people have this need, for whatever reason, to have the opposite once in a while. Now, it is true, you can't see the light unless you see the dark, right? Or you can't see the dark until you see the light. So you have to have something to contrast. But most people tend to go really overboard with that contrast, and they put themselves in positions all the time to kind of test that theory out, and whether or not they should have a lot of darkness in order to see the light. Now, I promise you, with Satan running around, you're going to have a lot of darkness at different times in your life, because you're going to be tested. But you don't necessarily have to bring that upon yourself by doing all these type of things to get extra excitement or adrenaline flowing. People can do constructive things, whether it's exercising, whether it's achieving goals, things like that. All those type of things you can do without going ahead to the extreme and jumping off a mountain, right? or going involved in some kind of, crazy long driving, high speed driving types of things that people do a lot of, or drinking and getting crazy, drinking too much, or getting involved in drugs and all kinds of stuff like that. You don't necessarily have to do that. Or gambling. The best example of this, as I'm thinking about this, is gambling. Right? A lot of people gamble because they need that thrill. And I guess we can talk about the thrill, the adrenaline, the thrill, and this is what causes a lot of the problems. So one of the obstacles of our retention is people need to have some thrills. And so what they do is they go to these type of things, whether they, have sex with some person. It's a very thrilling exercise and thing, right? After the fact, they may not be so happy about it, but during it, or the chase, whatever you want to call it, people are happy about it. They get the thrill, right? The same thing with any kind of sporting event or any kind of challenge. They get excited about that. Now, can a person create the excitement on their own? Of course they can. They could do that internally. They could do that with God. They don't need to go into a self-destructive type of thing. Playing sports is one thing. Yes, you can get hurt playing sports, but it's a whole different thing when you do this when it comes to taking drugs to see how the drug is going to affect you, or you are gambling to see if you can kind of beat the odds and you're losing money left and right here and you keep trying to go against it, or you're doing some kind of bungee jumping thing, or you're driving cars at a fast speed just because you can do it, not knowing the consequences. Could be accidents or tickets or things like that, being pulled over. All those type of things are high adrenaline things. I know that the research I saw one time was that the highest number of tickets were given to red sports cars, probably flying at 100 miles an hour, right? Now, why would you do that? Well, people like the speed. They like the adrenaline, like the thrill. This is what causes a lot of problems. And so what happens to people is, I guess you could say another way, they become bored. So people who have a lifestyle in which they're peaceful and happy, they become bored. And so it's really a kind of a crazy dynamics we have with people. And it's hard to understand it, and I don't really understand it to extent, but I will say this, that people live in a kind of a complex type of world, that they're not happy. Most of them are not happy just going along and having everything peaceful. Having your benefits, getting a lot of those type of things, to most people should be pretty exciting. But what happens is people tend to want to go to the extremes to get that thrill. And I remember there used to be a crazy stunt person named Evel Knievel back in the old days, 1970s, 1980s, and he would take motorcycles and jump off of cliffs, jump off over cars, all kinds of crazy stuff. And they asked him, I think one time, why he did this, and he said point blank, he says, I like the thrill, the adrenaline that comes with this, and knowing that, I may not survive this. Now think about that for a second. People are willing to kind of put their life on the line because they want the thrill. And I think when you think about that, this is why we have a moral, discrepancy in our society, a moral, disaster, whatever you want to call it. Because from a morale standpoint, people will go to these extremes because they're bored. They really need excitement. And instead of enjoying and basking in the excitement of, the benefits you have from the journey you have, a lot of people will go off of that, veer off the journey, and go to the excitement. This is why you can just imagine yourself going down the road and keep on your trail, and you have all these temptations on each side of you. And they're asking you, come on in, come on in, come on in, come on in. We'll have excitement, some wine, some fun, some, intercourse, all kinds of stuff like that. And they're driving you in, right? Oh, we can do some drugs. We'll do some slot machines. We'll go ahead and, view a horse race or just get involved in a lot of things that are exciting. And so what ends up happening is people get caught into that world, and eventually they can't get out. And this is why we kind of talked about this the other day. We talk about things like edging and being very careful as you get into temptation to not allow temptation to take you over. It's almost like we talked about with the birds flying overhead. They can fly overhead and they'll be always overhead. Birds will be overhead. Temptation will be always to each side of you. But the question is, will you allow that to nest in your hair, in your head, right? Will you go over and take some walks towards that temptation? And this is something you have to avoid. And we all go through this. I mean, I've seen it even with my monk mode, where I have to, it's almost like, I remember this famous type of thing with one of my favorite actors, Bela Lugosi, and he's got Van Helsing over here, and there's a scene, I think, in the house where it's only Van Helsing and Lugosi, and Lugosi says, "Come here, right? Come here." And so he's trying to get Van Helsing to come here to bite his neck and control him, and control his will. Well, Van Helsing takes a couple steps, but then backs up because he has a strong will himself. And so Lugosi says, "You have a very strong will, Van Helsing, very strong will." And this is what you need to have in these situations. I mean, we all can't help if you're going to take a step forward into those situations. However, you can help yourself from taking too far steps and not stopping. And what I'm suggesting we do is with temptation, even though you might be hit at times with temptation. A beautiful young lady, a beautiful young man, if you're a woman, walks in front of you, and all of a sudden now, you're tempted. Doesn't necessarily mean that you go and talk to that person. Doesn't mean you go ahead and chase that person around. What it means is that you recognize you were tempted. And what I usually do is go through exercises to transmute that energy, because that energy is there. And it doesn't always work that way for me, but I try to do that. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Now, certainly how you handle a situation is important in yourself, but always remember, the goal is to keep your energy as long as you can and as much as you can. This is what my goal is. And, this is why I say that I've enjoyed all the benefits of it. Now, once again, we've talked about this before. And some people out there, that research indicates, you go 5, 6, 7 days, you should release it, things like that. Well, the trouble with all of that, again, is you're letting the birds in, and they're nesting. Even if it's 1 day a week, they're nesting. And so what's going to prevent then to start doing 2 days a week? And now you're doing it twice a week, right? And it's a continual, it's habit forming, because it's so enjoyable. And why wouldn't it be? Satan's giving us that idea that this is enjoyable, that the pleasure of this is enjoyable. And just think about the idea of release, my friends. The whole idea of release is you're releasing something, and that is giving you pleasure. Now, that's interesting, right? We may talk about this on maybe tomorrow even. But why is that release pleasurable? It's almost like you're bottling everything inside, stress-wise, and now you're releasing. Very fascinating. But we're kind of running out of time for today. Anyway, the whole idea again is that one of the obstacles to our journey is boredom. People get bored. Don't get bored. Remember your plan. Everything is focusing on positive movements. Step forward, not step back. All right. Until tomorrow or next time I can actually record. Have a great day. God bless you guys, and battle on.